Hi, thanks, Kiti, for the opportunity. And to talk about a little bit about myself, my name is Jitin. I'm currently working as a solution architect with ThoughtWorks. So I published a book around 6 months ago on AWS. The name of the book is Distributed Serverless Architectures on AWS. You could find it on Amazon. You could find it on O'Reilly, on almost many other platforms. You just have to Google about it.
Talking about writing a book, right? So because there are so many people out there who are liking to share the knowledge, like me, like I choose a medium as YouTube, and there are people like who make regular blog post. Yeah. So
Mhm.
that used to be like in like from Tamil Nadu, there used to be say like few people who writes jokes in the old days, like weekly, and then after they have like jokes, they used to collect all
Mhm.
these jokes and they put a joke book like 100 books. It used to be like old way of tradition, like they keep on. Then I always had in mind, like, okay, we people used to write technical blog, and is it possible to make like 100 blog posts and then take a collection of it, how it would look like to make a book out of it, right? So I had already in mind, and but it's just one perspective to think about, like writing a book, because when a few people think like a book itself, it's like a curriculum book or too much of educationalist or like a syllabus oriented stuff. But it's the another perspective to look at, like when we look of like story books or the other more journals, there are other ways to publish the book as well itself, right? So how your thought of writing book comes in, and what was the spark that driven the journey towards it?
So in my life, I never met any authors who wrote tech books in real life. So when all of a sudden I found one of my friend's friends or one of the person in my church, he has written two books. So I was in awe. I was like, wow, two books. That was somewhere in 2020, and I was like, I called him up and asked like, how did you manage to write a book? Yeah, it just happened. He told. And I used to think like, okay, I have to write a book. So many diagrams I have to draw. So many things I have to arrange. So much content needs to be there. Here I'm struggling to write few blog posts. I loved writing, to be very honest. I liked literature, anything and everything about literature I was good. But I used to write non-tech stuff mostly. I had blogs, but those were non-technical blogs. So this was the idea. It was only like somewhere in the end of 2021. I was just resigned from my previous organization and I was about to join ThoughtWorks. In that break, one of the publisher, he had pinged me. He's from Apress. He had pinged me and asked, "Hey, do you want to write a book or do you want to take a technical session for you?" So I read that mail twice and see, is is he a real person or is it? So no, I checked his LinkedIn and he was a acquisition editor. His name was Celestin. He was an acquisition editor with Springer Nature, which has acquired Apress. So I thought like, okay, I have given technical sessions before, so I had spoken at reInvent and all before that. But I thought like, okay, let me try. Writing a book is something different, so let me try at that. And so this is my journey. Okay, there are different ways to do about it. So after that, they said I told like, yeah, I'm interested in writing a book. Then they sent me a detailed proposal form, which I had to fill. The form had all the details. It had the details of the book you want to publish. What is the content of the book at an abstract level? Then how many chapters are going to be there in this? Are there different I mean, if you look at any book, be it O'Reilly, be it Packer, most of them have the same questions like, is this book available in market? If so, what is your unique selling point or USP of your book? There was a lot of questions like that which I had to answer, and I had to give all the chapters at a high level and everything, and submit it as a proposal form. So I submitted the proposal form, and it got accepted, and that's how the journey began.
Nice. So yours is an interesting journey from the other point of, right. Like, generally, people start with writing the book and then they hesitated without knowing like where we can reach the right people. But you have the initial spark of finding the right people, and they act as a provoking to start writing the book. And good that your book proposal got selected at first place. But the one point which will be common, irrespective of like getting the publisher, or you write the book first and then get the publisher, it's going to be preparing the finding the niche of what the book is going to about, and what is the the selling point which you mentioned for your book, and finding the research, like is there any already book available in the market. So for those 3 points, shall we take one by one, like how to find a niche to start with, because it's not like everyone get the publisher first, but
Correct.
the starting point, irrespective of getting, because if you don't have those 3 points, even if you get a publisher, it's going to be a failure, or it's not going to be a success point. So I will start with these 3 points focus. Like first, maybe finding the niche.
Okay. So for me, finding the niche happened quite organically. I can't call it because the area of expertise I had was quite niche. I was from 2018 to nearly when 2022, I was working in serverless end to end. So serverless was new. There were a few books around it, but I decided that, hey, this is my area of expertise because I was working on multiple clouds and multiple services using serverless technologies to weave up different applications, different variety of application, on-prem, hybrid, migration, you call it. So then I thought like, okay, if I have to write, it is going to be this. All right. So I had decided upon. So if anyone wants to write a book, they need to find their niche, but they also need to understand that they would require certain level of expertise in this. All right. Otherwise, what happens is you decide, okay, now you have the WebAssembly. You decide that, okay, I want to write on WebAssembly, but you have no experience about it. So when you start writing about it, maybe one chapter, two chapter, third chapter, after that, your content may get dried up. If you don't have enough experience around it, it becomes really difficult for you to share your experience with your readers, derive insights out of it, or different things. So finding a niche, it's like finding an area. It may be an established area. See, it can still be Kubernetes. Kubernetes, there are like hundreds of books available now, but you can focus on one area and say, okay, how to deploy Kubernetes on serverless? What are my learnings around it? That can very well be a book you can write about implementing in Azure, implementing in AWS, implementing what are the common points, what are the differences if you want to run it on a fully managed. So, I mean, there are different ways you can double click on different topics. So you need to understand that what area you have. It need not be a niche as such, but it can also be an area which is not explored by other authors in their books. And you want to share your learnings and your insights with your readers through a book can very well contribute to the proposal form that you are going to submit to the author. So if your publisher is not reaching out to you, 99% it doesn't happen. It happens the other way around because you need to go to the publisher's website, download the proposal form and submit it. That's as easy as it goes. But ensure that you have a high level view of what you're going to write. You have a rough idea of the content and then you submit it. You have a higher chance of your book getting published.
That's a good point, Jitin. The point of like where your expertise lies on and where you're interested towards it. Because I have seen people who might be like working day to day on pipeline, but still they would be like not happy with it because the entire world is driving towards Kubernetes. But if
Mhm.
you are expertise in pipeline, then you know the in-depth the knowledge of the pipeline, like setting it up, than the person who are well versed in Kubernetes or other ones. So that's where your expertise lies in. And if you want to share your knowledge rather than feeling the imposter syndrome of like, am I capable of doing it? Begin with what you are good at and then start sharing the knowledge. And that can expand you to the next level of the further technological exploration part. Yeah, so that's
I want
yeah. So go ahead.
I want to bring in one more point. Sorry for the interruption. At this point, you mentioned that one person has already spent his experience building pipelines day in and day out, and he looks at other persons are there who are expertise in Kubernetes. So when you look at the IT as a team, we have different members who are experts. When you write a book, it need not be you alone. You can always pair up with another author and co-author the book as well. The book publishers give you the option for that as well. So if you look at books by thought workers, there are around 100 plus books written by thought workers. Many of them have paired. There are at least 3 people, 4 people writing a single book. So that big book becomes more content rich because it's the experience of 4 persons, 3 persons put together, which makes it more enriching as well. Just wanted to bring that point
Yeah,
up.
so that's a nice point. Like if maybe you can put it another way around. Like if your interest towards Kubernetes and maybe like combining the pipeline with Kubernetes, then pairing up with the Kubernetes, you both share the knowledge and each other grow together and form a networking. It's all about networking and showcasing the skill set as part of writing the book and growing the knowledge together. Yeah, so that's a good point. Like and then expanding more than 2 to 3 members and finding the right people, and there are n number of people who are ready to share the knowledge in the LinkedIn, like Ajitin, myself, and more are there. Like you can just find the right tags and you should be able to easily figure it out. So moving to the next one, it's about following the flow, right? So now we have the niche topic where to write on, and then how
Mhm.
to write down the skeleton of the book, or like what are the chapters is going to be, or how to figure the what is the end outcome of the reader of the book. Because if we say serverless, it can be anything of serverless, right? For example, it can be of database is there, then you have pipeline is like with the cloud world, you take anything, even for AI now they're saying like there's a serverless service like Bedrock is there. So
Yeah.
uh, like so the people should be narrow it down further on serverless, what they're going to be, or how it is planned.
So I will share my experience first, then I will make it more generic. So when I decided that I will write on serverless, the next question was the obvious thing, like how do I detail out the skeleton? Because that is also part of your proposal form. If you're going for a publisher, if you're going the self-publishing route, obviously like you can decide what, we'll come to that later. But yeah, so I decided that I was serverless. Then I noticed that the next thing I did is I searched for what books are available online. So I searched for different books. I had the O'Reilly subscription, and I could read different books with that. I found that most people were double clicking on, they were taking serverless, but when they say serverless architectures also, I couldn't find a book which described serverless architectures for different like data platform, disaster recovery, event driven, and so on. So I decided they would take up one application and they would deep dive on it, they would write about it, but I couldn't see anything on the serverless patterns or architectures as such. That is when I decided that okay, in serverless, I will write about different serverless architectural patterns that I've come across, and then present it to my readers so that they understand that there is a life beyond this serverless functions. You can even build your entire web application, your data platforms, your container-based applications, everything you should do, you could do using serverless. Even your disaster recovery, you could do using serverless. So then I decided like, okay, now what? Now how many chapters should I write? So roughly the first thing I did is I roughly wrote down some 8 to 9 chapters. Then I started deciding upon like, okay, what all can I write in this? What so here one important factor that helped me was I had nearly 4 to 5 years of experience working in this field, working in serverless alone. So it was easy for me to figure out different things that I could share that was not existing in the public platform, which is really important because when you write a book, it's different from writing a blog. Like you asked a question, right? Can I write 100 blogs? And here the plagiarism area comes into matter. You cannot quote anything that's in the public domain. Your content has to be fresh. It needs to be non-published. These are the conditions that publishers put across. So that was also there. So I decided upon like what could be right. So I decided a chapter upon okay, I will first introduce what serverless is, talk about distributed systems, then go to different types, event-driven, disaster recovery, and so on. So yeah, that was my. So if you have to, when you think about writing a book, like you mentioned, it can be either way around. It can be either you start writing the book, you prepare your contents, and then you go to a publisher and say, hey, this and all. I have details. I get published. I can write it on this. You agree upon a timeline and you publish. If you're initially going, you can obviously have a 1 year timeline with your publisher. I had nearly a 1 year timeline with your publisher. So either way around, either you do the skeleton first, decide upon, and ensure that okay, you do have some content you can write upon it, or you physically write everything and then you go to your publisher and say, hey, I can publish a book real quick. These are the contents I've already worked on it. It's the same either way. Yeah.
Got it. So the third point which you mentioned is about the USP, if I'm correct. Yeah. So
Unique selling point.
yeah, unique selling point, like how do you figure it out, or what are the steps to follow on that, getting that?
Okay. So mine, it happened. See, I decided that okay, I need to write about this, and the USP came when I searched for what people have written about serverless. So when I searched, I found that they have not written about architectural patterns, even though they have the combination that I was giving, event-driven, disaster recovery, there was not there in any other books. At least I went through at least 5 to 7 books. I mean, at a glance, and saw the content. I saw that it was not there. So similarly, if you're writing about Kubernetes, people have written many things about Kubernetes. So then if you want to write a unique selling point, you need to bring about a unique experience. Say you ran Kubernetes clusters for a multi-cloud application simultaneously serving on Azure, GCP, and AWS. It becomes a new implementation. Such things people may not have done. So that becomes a USP for your book. All right. So similar kind of things. So it should be unique. That's it. Like it should not be published anywhere else.
Okay.
And the idea can be same, but implementation or something should be different.
Got it. So does language plays a role in terms of unique selling point? Let's say there can be a number of books in English, maybe like in German, and you want to make it in regional language, let's say Tamil or other place. Does it have any differentiation when it comes to USP as a?
Okay. I think at this point, I will talk about self-publishing versus publishing through an established publisher. I think that's a good point you brought about. So I had a publisher. Okay. Apress was my publisher. And I used to publish books through them. So they will have their own contract, their own set of rules and everything, which we have to abide by when we are signing the contract with them. So this language aspect, maybe if it's acceptable to them, they will say okay. If it is not acceptable to them, they will reject it. All right. But if you are doing the self-publishing route, say Amazon Kindle, and there are other self-publishing routes which you can take, in that you can publish whatever you want. All right. There is no restrictions as such, but then you will need to hire people for your proofreading, validating your book, and getting it across channels, different distribution channels, all that background work, logo design. So I know people, I know my friends and colleagues who have spent a good amount of money, 80,000 to 1 lakh, when they have gone the self-publishing route. All right. So for me, my investment was zero, but then you have to abide by this thing. Again, the language aspect entirely depends on the publisher. So if the publisher is okay, you want to publish a Spanish book or you want to publish a regional book in Tamil, if they see that it's got certain traction, they will agree to it. But I'm not the right person to comment on it.
Got it. So thought of checking on the USP perspective, like how it's going to differentiate. But I got the clarity. It's going to be differ from the publisher to publisher. Plus, but the major point I can think is about whatever the book the people is going to write, it should be unique in the market to differentiate from.
Need not be unique as such. The publishers also have their market and research analysis team behind them. So I know my other friends who have written books, when they submit to the publisher, they will tell that, hey, the audience that you're targeting is only a small percentage. I don't think it would be worth the investment that we are putting in as a publisher, because the audience is so less, so we don't see any traction for your book. We can't foresee any traction for your book. I know people whose 2 to 3 books have been rejected only because the market that they are catering to is quite less. So when I wrote book about serverless and AWS, it was a huge market. Means worldwide people are. So maybe that was the reason why it got accepted very early. But there are people who write about very niche technologies, say write about mobile development as such. So sometimes finding market becomes tough. It again depends on the publisher. Some publishers are okay to take it. Some publishers find it okay. I don't think it's good. So they have their team behind them. So that is also another factor.
Yeah. So from your perspective, what your thought? What made the publisher to reach out to you? Or like what work
Okay,
you?
I had asked this to the publisher directly, like, how did you reach out to me? So what he mentioned that was my GitHub repo was the source. He saw that I had some contributions. So I used to take in my previous organization AWS enablement programs. So in that, to do the cloud work, I used to do it on my personal laptop, and I used to have it uploaded in my GitHub, the training and everything. But it was like it didn't have any company or proprietary information. It was all simple exercises. So I had, apart from that, I had a lot of contributions using AWS. I had built some clients, built some classes. I was a developer also back then. So I had few AWS related. So he saw that and he connected with me. So
Nice.
that's the explanation he had given me.
So I'll also link your GitHub repo also in the description so that people can go and check it out. What the best practice maybe follow on making a public GitHub repo because getting a in GitHub, it's like it's really hard thing. And
my GitHub repo is not very exhaustive. So this I would, if I have to say, I don't know how many of you will buy this, but my wife was carrying at that point of time, and it was at that point. So I always believe that it's the blessings of my younger daughter. Because if you see, my GitHub repo is not like hundreds of thousands of GitHub projects that I have done. It was very handful back then, maybe around 20, 25, not more than that. But for the publisher to see it and get back to me, I think it's God's blessings. That's how I see it.
Yeah,
sure.
It's plus the work which you have done, right? It's like it's both, obviously, like what the US wants to say and what's it's that.
So also, I would say that I don't know how many will buy this again. So when I was in my previous organization, I used to take AWS enablement sessions. So the idea behind me taking the sessions was to educate everyone about AWS, and also I also get a little bit more in-depth knowledge about it. So I remember spending weekends and weekdays preparing the content and presenting it to them, and I never got anything in back. Okay? I mean, there was like zero returns. Okay, I felt a little bit sad at that point of time. Later on, like for my future enabled versions, yes, they did. I did have some rewards and recognitions, but it was not there. So maybe this was the way it got rewarded. You could say, like, although it didn't get rewarded back then, sometime later, some publisher saw my work and thought, like, hey, this guy, since he takes training, maybe he will be able to write a book. I was a first-time author, so I didn't have, like you mentioned, hundreds of blogs or any content as it. All my content was non-tech till then. All right, so yeah, I had a blog, but it just had one post: how to crack the AWS solution architect certification.
Right.
So yeah, so that's why I say like it's rewarding. It's God's blessings, my younger daughter's blessing. That's how I see it.
Nice. So one more thing is like about the tooling part, right? So when you want to start writing the notes, there are going to be like a number of chapters, and you might need to do so many proofreadings, and maybe like you want to swap the chapters. It can be tricky of writing the book itself, right? Like, and then we are not going to write it pen and paper. Obviously, you need to write it in the digitally for the easy sharing and publishing part. So any specific tooling recommended to start with writing the book?
So I'll be very, very simple. I wrote all my entire book using Word document. That was not even the regular Microsoft Word, the Google Docs free Word version that you get it. And I used draw.io to draw all my architecture diagrams, which is also open source and which is also free. Those are the only two tools I used, if you ask me.
Right, because people
no complicated tools.
Nice. So people like me was take a back step thinking like what tools they would be using to write a book. Do they not use the fancy one? And yeah, it's glad to hear like you simplified as simple as of just a Google Docs and draw.io for the architecture diagram.
Yeah, you can. I try. I'm not saying that I didn't try any complicated tools. Okay, so I tried not Prisma. There was this tool that we generally use. UX designers use for designing. I forgot that.
Yeah, Figma, I think.
Figma. Yeah, Figma. I tried Figma. It was so complicated. The learning curve was there to understand. When you draw architecture diagrams, you need that smooth flowing icons, arrows going up and down. So I felt that the design was simple. You had all the icons. The integration with Drive was seamless, so I could integrate it with Drive, insert images from there, back to the document, and so on and so forth. It was really simple that I could do it, and I did explore the other tools. I did speak to a few other authors also, and combining all that, I found that okay, these two tools, you have the content, you have the architecture in mind. Yes. I'll tell you that just a Word document is enough for you to view magic.
Let's talk about the impact, right? How do you how to measure the impact created by the book itself, right? For example, if I'm making a YouTube video, I can go to analytics and see like, okay, so this many people are retention is there. If I'm writing blog posts, then again you get some metrics from the SEO part of the website, based on the reactions of the people. So on writing the book, how do you measure the impact of the book which you have written?
Okay. So when you write a book, you get something called as a royalty. All right. So if you're going with a publisher, well-established publisher, your royalty may be a little bit less. But if you're taking a self-publishing route, your royalty will be really high. Even if you're doing self-publishing, you need to have some publisher who is accepting it. So your royalty will be nearly very high. So based upon the royalty, that is your single source of truth, which shows like how many books have been sold. So for me, I get quarterly statements of the books that have been sold. So nearly around, I guess, 100 books have been sold in the first 2 quarters, I believe. So it was published in February, so Jan to March and April to June. And this quarter, I'm yet to get the report. So your royalty statement is your source of truth to know like how many it has reached. And it was quite surprising that my books, hard copies, have sold more than the Kindle versions. I expected the other way around. I thought like people buy Kindle more, but the people have bought the hard copies. So I still believe that there are a lot of people around there who wants to have a physical copy than just reading it from their laptop. So I was quite happy.
That's good to know. Actually, it's a hit. It's like a not many people know that, right? Like because even I was believing till you were saying few seconds back that people are buying hard copy. Like more tech people will switch to fancy Kindle and soft copy. But yeah, it's good to know like people are still buying the hard copy for the that too.
For me, it is like it's the experience. Like you come out of your laptop, you have your sofa, you have your coffee, and you're just casually going through a book. It gives a total different experience. Or you are in your balcony, you're with your book. But when you're with laptop, you cannot relax. You need to put your laptop there, sit like this, read through it. So Kindle is also another option, but I don't know. Maybe the people of my generation, from the like we call it the late 80s kids, they still prefer books. Yeah, some of my friends have also asked me to make some YouTube videos around it. I told them maybe sometime later. You buy the book first.
Any tips from you, like how to narrate a book, right? Because, for example, if you can be like, since we are talking about tech book itself, if you can think about like giving a exercise to do for the viewers or for the readers, or it can be practical demo they wanted to go through it. So any such recommendation from you, like to keep the book engaging and.
So when you decide to write a book, I mean, the narration itself matters. So if you're going with a well-established publisher, they will have a, see, for me, I had a person who was there were two editors. There was a tech panel and there was a non-tech panel also. The tech panel would see all the tech content of my book. The non-tech panel would see the English and the flow of them. So when I was writing about the book, I was educated on how to navigate between different sections of the book, how one section should lead to another section, how one chapter it should have an introduction and summary, and how that we should build it in such a way like it leads to the other book. So there were a lot of things I was educated on. So when you're writing a book, it's like you're narrating a story. So it needs to have a background. You cannot, like you mentioned in the beginning, right? Can I write 100 blog posts and combine it all in a book and give? It won't make sense because the book, you need to have the connection. How was when you read the first chapter and when you read the last chapter, it shouldn't be like totally north end and south end. It should have some connection which you have built, which you have told, and then finally you have ended up on. So for me, I started with serverless introduction. Then I described what distributed systems was. Then distributed serverless, different patterns I narrated. Then I went ahead with going in multi-cloud. Then I went with well-architected framework of AWS. Like there are like the 6 chapters on architectures. You put the well-architected framework. How does all these 6 patterns fit into that? Then I did a conclusion on what is what. So that idea should be there when you're sending the proposal also, because they will look into that as well.
One last question before we wind up is that since we are talking about contracts, since we are using words like 1 year, 10 year, you write the book and things like that. For the people, do you have any recommend like how many royalties are will be like a decent? If you can tell a range, you don't want to say like what percentage you got. You can give a range like how much percentage it's a decent publisher, so that the people who are watching it's not getting cheated, from XYZ company, and also any impact you see like okay, you agreed for something. Is there any like negative impact of signing a contract if you fail to get the book delivered? So just 2 points, and then we can wind the session.
Yeah. So the royalty, if you're going as through a publisher, it will be quite less. It will be less than 20%, if you ask me. Maybe even less than 15 for some. All right. But if you're going for the self-publishing route, your royalty can be as high as 40 to 50%. But what you need to understand is when you are going through a established publisher, there is a distribution channel for the publisher. There is a marketing channel for the publisher. The publisher floats your book across the globe through different offline and online channels as well, which you get access to all this. But if you're going to the self-publishing route, you need to do all this. You need to invest. Like I told about my friend who spent at least 1 lakh to get. So his royalty is 40%, but to even out, he needs to sell that much books. Then he's even. Then he goes beyond that. So that is one. And if you have to talk about anything negative about contract, so when we sign the contract, we are supposed to deliver the book. But in case of emergency or there is some unforeseen incident happening, you can always request your publisher. But my 2 cents here would be always have a buffer time. If you think you can finish within 8 months, plan for at least 10 months, because there may be some unforeseen incidents. God forbid it may happen. But always have that buffer, always have that gap. You plan to write something, but you are stuck. You're not able to resolve the issue. You think about it, or some important project work came. You need to spend time about it on that, and you were not able to complete this. So always have that buffer. Yes, the contract, once it is signed, you're supposed to deliver them because they have their timelines. Because once you deliver your final manuscript, there are at least 8 to 10 steps that follow till the book gets published. So all that, there will be a subsequent cascading delay. You need to stick the timelines, but one way to work around it is have a buffer and mention that, okay, I can write in 8 months, but I will give it 10 months just to have a buffer. In case it gets published, I can give it always early. There's no harm.
Got it. Yeah. Cheers, Jitin. Thanks for your time, and thanks for the time on the holiday. That's more important.
Yeah, thanks, Krithivasan. Have a good day.
Yeah, it's really interactive one. And so people who are hearing this podcast or watching on YouTube, do comment any follow-up question. Also share your feedback, like how the knowledge you gained, it's benefit for you. So see you in the next video. Until then,
yeah, anything, any information you want about writing tips, help, I'm there on LinkedIn. You can always connect with me. Happy to help.
Cheers.
Have a good day.
Yeah, thanks.